Have I got a story for you? Pretty good way to get someone's attention, don't you think? It pulls you right in, to the edge of your seat, as it were, as if to say, look, you really need to pay attention to what's about to happen. You need to hear this because it's going to matter. It's going to matter a lot. It's the hook, the invitation, the anticipatory tease. Have I got a story for you? We human beings are, by our very nature, storytellers. Perhaps it's even inevitable in our lives. Our lives are our stories. We can't help but tell those stories. We think in stories, we dream in stories, we remember in stories. Storytelling likely played a major role in our evolutionary survival. Why? Because it provided an adaptive challenge. You see, storytelling actually fosters coordination, and it allows for group behavior to emerge, facilitated cooperation. We pass on knowledge by telling stories, knowledge that moves from generation to generation. So we are, in so many ways, hardwired to be storytellers and to respond to storytelling. But what if storytelling is more than just a powerful rhetorical tool? What if stories literally had the power to change the world? Have I got a story for you? Thomas King, who is the writer of our reading today, he's of Cherokee and Greek ancestry. He's regarded as one of the most influential indigenous writers and scholars of his generation. That book, The Truth About Stories, I love that book. It's one of the first books they gave me to read in seminary. And it's a book that I go back to over and over again because the stories, especially coming from this native writer, are filled with this idea that stories influence us, that stories actually help make us who we are. A phrase he uses over and over in the book is repeated across multiple stories that he tells. He says, the truth about stories is that stories are all we are. The truth about stories is that stories are all we are. That's a pretty powerful and awe-inspiring concept if you dig into it a little bit. And what I think it means, at least in part, is that there is a direct connection between our story and who we actually are. Finding the dividing line between our stories and who we actually are is a bit of a challenge. Let's dig into this a little bit further. Here's my real question for you. Who do you understand yourself to be? Like, who is the real you? When you get down to it, who is the real you? How do you know what the real you is? What is the story that you have about who you really are? It's the essential question each of us is asking ourselves in some ways, is it not? Who are we truly, deep down? And how do we know that? It's the very concept of our identity. In essence, who we are is related to who we say we are, at least in theory. It touches on self-awareness, it touches on self-concept, but the idea is that there is a self, and the only way ourselves can be known is to tell stories about ourselves. The self. Who am I really? Who am I? You know, I might answer that question very differently depending on the context of who I'm talking to. I might actually apply different lenses to that response. So, for example, one could answer the question of who am I really from the lens of psychology. Or maybe you want to answer that question from the lens of philosophy. Or maybe it's some other discipline. Maybe it's accurate to say that we express that inherently complicated answer through our storytelling. and the words that we choose to tell those stories. We tell stories about who we really are, what really motivates us, what really moves us, what really connects with us. And from that perspective, do we not make our truest self known through story? And if any part of that is true, hear this, friends. If any part of that is true, then it matters a great deal the story we're telling ourselves. Why? Because the stories we tell ourselves are actually key to who we are becoming. What does that mean? Well, I think in my own life, if I'm really honest, it gets really complicated for me to talk about who I really am. Some of us, perhaps you join me in this, some of us struggle with things like negative self-talk. We have that voice in the back of our head always telling us, you're not enough. You're not good enough. You say you're this, but you're really this. You don't do enough. You don't care enough. You're just not good enough. There is often a dissonance that we as human beings cannot escape between who we are and the stories we tell about ourselves and the stories we want to tell about ourselves. But here's the thing, that self-talk is the story you're telling yourself. And what you repeat to yourself over and over and over again becomes who you are. That's how powerful it is. If Thomas King is right and the truth about stories is that stories are all we are, then the stories we choose to tell ourselves have the power not only to describe us, but to actually decide who we are and who we're going to be. Now, beloveds, I don't know if there's someone here in this room or online who needs to hear this today, but let me be crystal clear about one thing, about a fundamental truth that I hold dear that's at the heart of Unitarian Universalism. And that is our faith proclaims boldly and without apology that every single person is worthy of love, of dignity, and of respect, period. No matter what the self-talk in your head, you are worthy of love, just as you are. Ours is not a faith that says you have to change to become worthy of love. You are not broken. You are not cast out. You are worthy in and of yourself. And our faith is about embracing that in a way that the self-talk, the negative self-talk, can change once we begin to believe the truth, that we are inherently worthy, that we have inherent dignity, and that we each are deserving of love. Because the truth about stories is that's all we are. Have I got a story for you? Because that's not all. Because if it's true that individually we are defined by the stories we tell ourselves, if it's true that the stories that we are embodying actually lead into the persons we are becoming individually, then is it perhaps also true that our collective story, our collective shared journey is a reflection of the stories we are telling about ourselves here, in this room, in this place, in this state, in this country? We are collectively the people that we tell the stories about. That's why covenant and right relationship must be central to what we do. The stories we tell really do matter. They not only communicate who we say we are, but in a very real sense create who we are going to be. Storytelling has long been a tool that can be used for connection, and healing and meaning making. But it's dangerous because those stories can also be used to make people feel isolated and overwhelmed, to create despair, to create a world in which some people are better than others. Those stories matter too. And despair can arise when we believe that our struggles are insurmountable, when we believe that our human dignity is less than it truly is, when we believe that there are some people who are better than others. We must tell the shared journey that includes our difficulties, but the way we tell the stories, even of our difficulties, is going to make a difference about how we move forward and about what is possible next. You see, storytelling encourages divergent thinking. The very process of generating multiple, often unconventional ideas comes from storytelling. Think about it. Good stories are full of twists and surprises, the unexpected turns. This mirrors the creative problem-solving process, where solutions to the problems we face are often non-linear. They're not immediately obvious. They are outside the box, so to speak. But when we approach a problem as a story, we give ourselves some freedom to explore and to experiment and to imagine the as yet unrealized. And if we can tell that story, oh boy, wouldn't we then have a story worth telling? Have I got a story for you? Now, some of you are looking at me with some skeptical eyes. You're thinking, now wait just a minute here. Are you really suggesting if we just think happy thoughts and positive stories and tell those things that everything's going to turn out right? All I have to do is tell myself what I want to be and that's going to happen? No, that's not what I'm saying. That's magical thinking. And at worst, magical thinking can devolve into false narratives. And false narratives can move us as a country in a very wrong direction very, very quickly. I'm not talking about propaganda. I'm not talking about lies. I'm talking about stories that affirm the truths of our values that we know deep inside. Have I got a story for you? Talking about a conscious shift to the narrative, because those who control the narrative control the future. And if we don't take control of our own narrative, if we don't make sure that the stories we are telling embody the values that we believe in, then the future will not reflect those values. We must tell our stories, and they must come from a place of truth, because a false narrative will not hold forever. We must tell those stories. And I want to acknowledge that this is particularly challenging in our current situation, is it not? Think about the current political climate. We are in a context that is dominated by competing narratives that not only feel but are diametrically opposed to one another. Competing narratives about what is wrong with this country and what the solutions are to fix it. And when those who wield the levers of power seem intent on telling a story that is rooted in greed and oppression and violence and hate, it can be more difficult to even imagine the change that we know we need. But friends, I believe that is exactly what we must do in this moment. We must face those challenges and bring to it the stories we need to tell. not make-believe, not magical thinking, but imagining and telling the story of how we get through this, how we restore our values to the public square, how we as individuals live into a truth that makes that negative self-talk dissipate just a little bit. Have I got a story for you? Thomas King says stories are wondrous things, and they are dangerous. Remember the witch's tale? The story being told by the witches, an awful thing full of fear and slaughter, disease and blood. It's a story of murderous mischief. And we cry out like those other witches, wait a minute, stop. We don't need that story here. That's not a good story. We don't need part of that. Can you please call that story back? Wouldn't we like to call some of the stories back? But here's the reality. Once it's told, it's loose. It has been unleashed into the world, but it's not the only story. And it's our responsibility to make sure it's not the only story. You want to resist fascism? Tell the story of your values. You want to build a community that respects each other, that respects all, that raises inherent worth and dignity? Tell that story. You want to be able to go to Thanksgiving dinner without it falling into this terrible experience where you can't talk about anything? Figure out a way to tell that story. What does that story look like? How do you navigate those times? Because every good story has plot twists and has challenges, but somehow in the greatest stories there is a way through. We have to find that thread. We have to find that narrative. And it's not just your personal story, but it's our collective story. What is the story you're telling here in this congregation, in this place? Is it an old story that you've been told before? Have you bought into things because you've been told them? Or are you living into your truest possibilities by telling a story that embraces a world you really want to see happen? I think about this in my job all the time. I serve as executive director for UU Faith Action New Jersey. So we're focused on social justice work. We're trying to make a change in the lives of everyday people here in New Jersey. We focus a lot on legislative advocacy. It's a big part of what we do. But more than anything, in the midst of those political environments, what's needed is a clear story. A story that talks about how we acknowledge the reality that we're in, but we find a way to move forward. You want to change climate? We need to talk about the story of what happens when we motivate ourselves, when we get together and we start to take actual action. You want to change immigration policy in this state? We need to have a narrative. We need to have a story that we're telling that is true and honest about why it's important and what we can do and how collectively it is better for all of us. You want to change and protect those core values of worth and dignity? Find the stories to tell those. UU Faith Action works to make that happen. I know this congregation is working to make that happen. I am so grateful for the history of this place in terms of the support that it provides. I'm grateful to Reverend Cynthia for the invitation to be here today. I'm grateful for Missy for all the work she has done and continues to do to engage us. I'm grateful for those of you who show up at our action hours, who take part in these legislative actions, who do just a little bit because you're being part of the story. You're telling the story that we want to make real. Is it hard? Yes. Are there competing narratives? Yes. But if we keep telling the story, stories are all we are. Boy, have I got a story for you. King will often end his stories like this, and I think it's a good one for us. he'll say, take this story. It's now yours. You can do with it what you will. You can tell it to your children if you want. You could cry over it. But don't say in the years to come that you would have lived your life differently if only you had known the story, because you've heard it now. And now you know. Oh, beloveds, have I got a story for you? Blessed be